Now, as we think about enhancing our wife's glory, I want to go back to 1 Peter chapter 3 because I think Peter lists 3 ways that I want to share with you here this morning that husbands can cultivate the glory or enhance the glory of their wife in the relationship with their wife. So look back there with me at 1 Peter chapter 3, and we want to look at several ways that help us. The Bible shows that we can enhance the glory of our wife in the relationship with her. Firstly, as you see in your workbook there, we need to be a husband who takes time for his wife. We want to enhance her glory. We want to help her grow in glory. We need to take time for our wife. Something as simple as taking time. Again, look at 1 Peter chapter 3 and look at verse 7. The first part of that verse says, "Likewise, ye husbands, dwell with them according to knowledge." The word dwell with means to live with or to take up residence with and spend time with. It's so much there incorporated in those words, dwell. Dwell, take up residence, spend time with your wife. Now, that's so critical that we really let this profound truth, I think, be engraved in our heart as a husband, that we need to intentionally spend time with our wife. Now, there's several ways I want to talk about that we are to spend that time. How are we to spend time with them? Well, there's some things that I think are very important to your wife that we need to understand. Firstly, there needs to be some time for affection. Some time for affection. Now, if you were to look up the word affection in the Webster's Dictionary, it defines affection as a tender feeling towards someone. I like that. That's a very neat definition. But if you were to survey wives all across America, and this has been done, and you were to ask them to give their definition of what affection means to them, this is what they would define affection, and this is how they would define affection. Most wives recognize affection as non-sexual, meaningful touch. Non-sexual, meaningful touch. A time when you hold your wife, you just hold her. There's no sexual agenda in mind. You're not trying to have sex with her, and she is not going to feel like an object of your sex just because you're touching her, but it's a non-sexual, meaningful touch. A kiss on the cheek, hugging her, holding her hand. All of these things are certainly very, very important to remember when we think about time for affection. I'm thinking also of the verse in Colossians 3:19 where it says, husbands, it says, love your wives and be not bitter against them. And to be not bitter is a reference there of being non-sympathetic. Don't be non-sympathetic or non-affectionate toward them. There needs to be affection in the relationship of the husband and the wife. We'll talk more about that in the last session, but certainly that is a very, very important truth. Secondly, time for attention. Time for attention. And to give your wife attention, you must be willing to listen to her. To listen to her. And a husband who will not listen to his wife is a very foolish husband. Because your wife, as I said in the earlier session, has a lot of intuition. She's made different than you, and God has made her to be a completer to you, to eliminate loneliness in your life, to be a companion to you, and she has a lot of wisdom she can share in the relationship with you. When giving attention, there should be no competition or distractions. You can't give someone your attention when there's competition. It's really hard to give your full attention to your wife when you're having to give attention to toddlers at the same time. What I'm trying to say is you have to carve out this time. You have to make this time happen. And it may mean getting up 15 minutes earlier. It may mean taking a walk at the end of the day and intentionally finding some time where you can be alone. It may mean while the kids are in bed at night, going out on the front porch and sitting down and just having time and carving out time for your wife to really give her attention. But there can't be competition or distractions if you're going to give her your full attention. Now, giving attention also requires showing empathy to your wife. And that word empathy means trying to put yourself in their place and feel what they're feeling. Now, I love to talk about this because I think it's a beautiful thing. When you think about, we've used the word head. Husbands, you're to be the head of your wife. You are the head of your wife. And that word in the Greek is kephale, and it's a very interesting word because in the Greek literature of the day and time, and even most of the places in the Bible, when that word is mentioned, it's really mentioning and picturing the actual head of a person or an animal. And I think that's a good illustration because what the Bible wants us to realize is you are the head of your wife. She is, the picture is she is your body. Husbands, love your wives even as you love your own what? Body. She is your body. You remember when Saul was on the Damascus road and Jesus came to Saul and he said, Saul, Saul, why persecutest thou who? Me. You know what he was saying? When you persecute my bride, when you persecute my church, you're persecuting me. She is me. That's the way a husband needs to think. She is me. My wife is me. She is my body. And if you take this physical body and you think about the physical body the way God has made us, my head must communicate with my body. My body must communicate with my head. If my head does not communicate with my body or my body doesn't communicate with my head, my person is in trouble. Amen? Same is true in a marriage. The husband, the head, must communicate with his body, his wife. The wife must communicate with the husband, the head. If they don't, the person, the one flesh relationship is in trouble. If you cut the neck right here and cut my head off my body and sever my head, my person dies. Now what I'm trying to say is, listen, if the body acts independently of the head, if my body starts doing all kind of funky stuff, acting independently of my head hasn't told it to do it, then I'm said to be having convulsions. I have a convulsive body. And the same is true in a marriage relationship. A wife who acts independently of her head is a convulsive marriage. And when the wife is acting independently of her head. But the same is true with the head. If the head is not directing the body, if the head is not responding to the body, then my body becomes paralyzed. And it does not function if my head is not leading my body. So my head must lead the body. My head must listen to my body, what's happening in my body. Listen, if I hurt my knee, somebody steps on my toe, or I smash my toe, it screams, my body screams to my head, do something, my toe is smashed. The same is true, and I'm trying to use this illustration because I think it's a very good one for us to remember that you must listen to what's happening with your wife. That's why it says in that verse, it says, likewise, husbands, dwell with them according to knowledge. You must have a knowledge, an understanding. That word knowledge also means understanding of what's happening in your wife's life. What is your wife's dreams? What is her goals? Where is she hurting? Where does she need strength? Where does she need encouragement? You're her head. You must listen to your body. You must know what's happening in your body. To do that, you must spend time with your body. And so many times, before we get married, we've got all kind of time. But after we get married, if we're not careful, we don't take time to listen and communicate with our wife. So important that there's time for attention. And we could talk much more about this. Let me go to the next thing, time for appreciation. There needs to be some time for appreciation, to show appreciation. And it's so many different ways that we can show appreciation to our wife. One of the ways it's very obvious would be through our words, through the words that we say. Talked a little bit about that in the last session. 1 Corinthians 8:1 says, love edifies, knowledge puffs up. Knowledge puffs up, but love edifies. It builds up. The word edify means to build up someone. Truly loving your wife, you want to build her up. And one of the ways you can build her up is through the words that come out of your mouth. One of the ways that you can quickly tear her down is through the words that come out of your mouth. The tongue has a power, it says in Proverbs, of life and death. And it's a sad day when husbands will emotionally degrade their wife and put down their wife by screaming at them, yelling at them, and treating them, even as it says in Malachi chapter 2, dealing with them treacherously. And many husbands do that. We have to be careful with the words that we say. And words of appreciation are important. I told my boys when they were growing up, I said, listen, you need to understand that Mama works very, very hard to prepare these meals. And she's a very good cook. And where you go in and it takes you 10 minutes to gobble up what she prepared, it took her several hours to prepare it. So you make sure you always tell your mama how good it was. Show her appreciation when you leave that table. Let her know how much you appreciate her. Let her know how much you appreciate her washing your clothes and putting them in your drawers. It doesn't just happen by itself. Somebody has to make that happen, and Mama makes that happen. You show appreciation to your mother. Let her know how much you appreciate her. And certainly I need to do the same as a husband. I need to continually show appreciation for all that Debbie does in our marriage relationship, which she does certainly so much. One of the things she does is she handles their finances. And I have so much on me that I'm so thankful that God has given her the ability to do that. And I often thank her that she takes time to do all that and handle all the finances in our personal finances and also in our ministry. Another way we can show appreciation is through our gifts, through gift giving. You know, and a gift says, I was thinking about you when I wasn't with you. Maybe when you're down at the grocery store in Fred Meyer's or somewhere and you see some flowers over there and you think, wow, I'm going to buy my wife some flowers. And it's a Tuesday or Wednesday. That's when it's special, when she didn't expect it. I mean, she expects it on Valentine's Day and her birthday and times like that. But in the middle of the week or odd times when she's not expecting it, and you pick up something, and it doesn't have to be really expensive, and you bring those flowers home or you bring some gift home to her, it just says, honey, when I wasn't with you, I was still thinking about you. It shows appreciation. I know when I go on trips, and Debbie wasn't traveling with me years ago, I would always look for some little gift to give her. She loved to collect mugs, so I'd always get a mug from a city I was in, and she would collect those mugs and other things too, and it would just be a picture of my love for her. I was showing appreciation to her when I wasn't with her. And we see this example in Song of Solomon, where that Solomon, even in chapter 1, talks about buying his wife bracelets and chains of silver and things like this to ornament her and deck her out and make her beautiful, giving her gifts of appreciation and love. And then also a third way is through our actions, through things that we do. Okay, there we go. Even around the house, some practical things. And, you know, just to go in at night now when we're at home and she's cooked a meal and I go in there, and I could go over. She wouldn't say a word if I went over and sat down and wanted to watch a sporting event or wanted to read a book or whatever else. And she did the dishes and cleaned up the kitchen. But often I will tell her and say, honey, listen, you did all the cooking, you did all this. Why don't you go take a break? I'll clean up the kitchen. I'll do the dishes. Just through things that we practically do, actions that we do, convey appreciation, certainly to our wife too. And not only does there need to be time, we might say, for attention, time for appreciation, time for affection, but also time for affirmation. For affirmation. And I'm using all these A's to help us remember this. Affirmation, and that is to affirm our love for our wife, to continually let her know how much we love her. And not just to say, I told you I loved you last week, but she wants to hear it every day. It's kind of like, it's like our relationship with Christ. You know, God is continually, through His love letter, the Bible is continually confirming to us and affirming to us through His Holy Spirit His love for us, that He will never leave us, He'll never forsake us. He's always there for us. Now, as we think about this, we also see all of this. Husbands are commanded to have an understanding of their wives. And that's what I said a while ago, that to do all these things, we must understand them. We must have a knowledge of them. I mentioned this little book in the last session, but this little book is so helpful for men only. And it really helps us to better understand physiologically, for sure, how that a woman is very different than a man. And it's just a very fun book to read and very helpful. To have an understanding, a better understanding of your wife, you also need something else. Something very, very important called trust in the relationship. And trust is, as I pictured it there on the screen, is the bridge to every relationship. If you don't have trust in a relationship, you don't have a relationship. There must be trust between the husband and the wife. So trust is the bridge in every relationship. And it says trust requires the removal of private, secret areas so that communication can be open and uninhibited. That is, we must take down all the walls, all the barriers, as I pictured in the last session, to make sure that we are open and unashamed. You must provide as a husband an open atmosphere for your wife to be able to come and talk to you. That she doesn't fear coming and sharing her heart with you. You know, thank God, as a bride of Christ, I can pray. I can tell God my hurts and my struggles. He knows them, but I can pray and go to Him, and He doesn't reject me. He allows me to come to Him openly to the throne of God and share these hurts and needs in my life. And a wife should have that type of atmosphere in the relationship with her husband, where she can come and be open, certainly with him. One of the greatest ways to developing a trusting relationship is by praying with your wife, by praying with her. But let me stop and say, too, it's one of the things, I guess, years ago I had the hardest thing to do for me was to just take a daily time of prayer with my wife. I could get in my own prayer closet and pray, but to take time to pray with my wife, I felt like it was just some reason it was so hard to do. And I began to realize, I believe it was because the devil fights that so much. And because he knows it's a powerful thing when a husband and wife come together in prayer and they join together spiritually as one and go to the throne of God. And I began to realize when I would get on my knees and I would pray with my wife, it's a very humbling thing. When I would pray and say, God, I don't know how to handle this situation. You see, we as men want to be macho. We want our wife to think we know it all and that there's nothing that affects us. So it's a very humbling thing to get on your knees before God and say, God, I really don't know what to do. God, I don't know how I'm going to pay our bills this month. God, I don't know what to do with this situation with my teenage son or my little girl. But you know, when you pray openly with God and you pray with your wife, you know what it does? It makes your wife see that you're submitted to God. And when she sees that you're submitted to God, it makes it much easier for her to submit to you. I often ask husbands, I say, how hard would it be for you to submit to someone who you thought was not submitted to God? A wife is commanded to submit to her husband. But it's not easy to submit to somebody who is not submitted to God. But when you pray and take time to openly pray with God and share your heart before God with your wife, she sees your submission to God, and it makes it much easier for her then to submit to you because she sees that your submission is to God. A great book in this area is A Praying Life by Paul Miller. He wrote the book A Loving Life, and one of my favorite books I've read in the last 3 years, and this is another one. It's a great book on prayer. And if you're looking for a book in that area, you might want to check that out. Dwelling correctly with your wife begins with dwelling correctly with Jesus. Again, I'm trying to just continually bring this back to our relationship with Jesus Christ as a husband. A lot of these things, I think, just will naturally, practically happen in our marriages if we keep our focus on Christ. If we in our personal life have our own quiet time, where that we're taking time to get in the Word of God, we're taking time to pray, that we're keeping our attention on having the right relationship with God, it puts all these other things kind of together. So the first area that we looked at here is a husband who has time or takes time for his wife.